everyone for joining today. My name is Barbara Suarez Galeano, and I am the organizing director for Detention Watch Network. We're here today. I'll be emceeing this press conference where we'll be hearing from different community groups across Chicagoland and the Midwest who will be talking about coordinated responses and denouncing both ICE's current expected academy for citizens and removal operations, as well as the expanded use of force and presence of ICE in the community of Chicago, and the new proposal for ICE to build a detention center here in the locality. So before we get into it, just want to make a couple
resign. This comes as power company comment.
Just want to make a couple of comments on interpretation. So, esta llamada va a ser interpretada al español. Para las personas que quieran unirse en español, marquen el número 605-313-4431 y el código para entrar al cuarto es 540145. Esa información se encuentra en el chat de Facebook Live si quieren oír esta conversación en español. So, again, we're about to get started. We'll be hearing from folks across the Midwest talking about our coordinated response to the ICE Academy, proposed expansion from ICE, and increased ICE activity in our community. So we're going to kick off our press conference with Liz Castillo, who is an organizer with Detention Watch Network. Take it over, Liz.
Good morning, everyone. As Barbara said, my name is Liz Castillo, and I'm an organizer with the Detention Watch Network, which is a national coalition that is seeking to build power through collective advocacy, grassroots organizing, and strategic communications to abolish immigrant detention in the United States. Alongside our members and other local groups here, we're here to condemn the gross attacks that ICE is directing at the Chicago and surrounding area communities through the dangerous propagandist tool that the ICE Academy represents, as well as the proposed expansion of its immigrant detention infrastructure here in the state of Illinois. At a time when the country is once again being forced to reckon with the violence that is perpetuated by law enforcement agencies, particularly against Black communities, this decision to launch an ICE Academy is one that is not just tone deaf, it's one that's dangerous. At best, this school will serve as yet another mechanism for the Chicago ICE field office to attempt to cover the harm it perpetuates every day. At its worst, this program, which includes training in defensive tactics, firearms familiarization, and targeted arrests, carries with it a lot of potential to foment racial profiling and violent vigilantism towards Black people and other people of color. This community doesn't need an ICE Academy. If anyone really wants to know how ICE operates in Chicago, all they have to do is listen to the hundreds of people who have shared their stories about being directly impacted in the many ways that they have been brutalized by the Chicago ICE field office and the existing detention centers in the state of Illinois. At a time when what are already few and very limited pathways to deportation relief are being put under attack and further constricted, including through the furloughing of employees at USCIS, directing resources towards this school goes beyond what is pernicious. As if this weren't enough, we were also learning that ICE is eyeballing Dwight, Illinois for a new privately run immigrant detention center. This flies completely in the face of the hundreds of Illinoisans across the state who have already held past state laws that would curtail private immigrant detention and who have stood up in this way and fought fearlessly against a similar proposal just last year. Now, amidst a global pandemic, we are witnessing ICE incompetence and lack of care for the lives of those it detains reach a new low. Despite repeated warnings from advocates, lawyers, members of the medical community, people who have been detained, ICE has not used its power to release a significant amount of people. Now, almost 4,000 people detained in ICE custody have tested positive for COVID-19. It's important to be clear on something here. Even before the onset of this pandemic, ICE had already shown us time after time how dangerous and fatal its detention system is. ICE shouldn't be detaining anybody, much less expanding its incompetent and neglectful detention system amidst a global health crisis that it has only further exacerbated. The state of Illinois and surrounding communities are struggling to stay afloat, struggling to survive through this pandemic, and they have real and immediate needs that are not being met. I shouldn't be given the tools and resources to further exacerbate harm in Chicago. The ICE Academy program, as well as any and all expansion plans, should be immediately terminated.
Thank you so much for that, Liz. And just a note to reporters who are part of this conversation, we'll be having a Q&A session at the end where you could participate either talking or putting your comments on the chat box. So naming that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Claudia Lucero with the Chicago Religious Leadership Network on Latin America. Claudia, you're on mute.
Turn the mic on.
We hear you.
Yeah, good morning all, and I'm so sorry. Thank you, Barbara, for the introduction. My name is Claudia Lopez, Executive Director of Chicago Religious Leadership Network in Latin America, Sierra Leone. For me, as an immigrant myself, it's so important, and I have the responsibility to speak up and demand the cancellation of the ICE Citizens Academy. Representing communities of faith, it's very important to stand up in solidarity with our brothers and sisters from the immigrant communities today. This kind of programs only increase hate and xenophobic sentiments against immigrants. Nothing good can come out of this hate training programs. And as a faith communities and community leaders we know that we need programs that bring people together in cooperation, tolerance, and understanding. We're against division and hate. We stand together for united communities. This is not the first time a government has tried to turn one community against another. We should learn from history. Never again. We must stop hate-based trainings. We must stand on the right side of the history, and we must cancel this program and sit in the city of Chicago and everywhere else. Chicagoans have come together in the past under great leaders like Harold Washington, and we need that kind of unity today. As a Chicagoans, I'm glad that I'm standing up right now with my colleagues, leaders from different organizations, to demand the end of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. That was Claudia Lucero with the Chicago Religious Leadership Network. We will now hear from Miguel Lopez Gutierrez, representative of Organized Communities Against Deportations.
Hola, buenos días. Hello, hi, my name is Miguel Lopez. I'm an organizer with Organized Communities Against Deportations here in Chicago. I'm here this morning denouncing ICE Academy as xenophobic propaganda to attract fellow racist people in helping them do their dirty work. Here in Chicago, we know what ICE is up to. We know that their quote unquote work is to break apart families and sow panic in our communities. About 3 weeks ago, when the Academy had recently been announced, Chicago ICE Field Office Director Robert Guarian was interviewed by WBEZ and said, quote, "Everyone was telling our story besides ICE. There's no other side. No one is telling our story," end of quote. And I want to respond to that. Robert Guarian, ICE does not need to tell their story. They've been telling it by their actions since their existence of the agency in 2003. You have told your story by patrolling our neighborhoods with unmarked vehicles that racially profile and detain our neighbors. You have told your story by targeting and retaliating against leaders in our community that organize to resist your terror. You have told your story by investing in technology that surveils and tracks down our people to be violently detained. You have told your story by buying off elected officials to ensure the contracting and renewal of ICE contracts with county jails, private facilities, and federal prisons. You have told your story by targeting and deporting DACA recipients like my brother. And you continue to tell your story by wanting to create a civil group that will cooperate and be complicit in the arrest, caging, and deportation of our peoples. Robert Guarian, we do not need your words nor your propaganda. We know what ICE does, and we will continue to organize to resist ICE attacks on our communities. And just as important it is to speak against this racist propaganda from ICE, it is just as important to cherish and uplift the amazing organizing efforts happening across the city and across the country to put an end to state-sanctioned violence from police departments to federal agencies like ICE and CBP. It's important to highlight the efforts that are not only putting an end to oppression, but that are also creating alternative realities that are just and transformative, that promote healing and not punishment, that address our needs instead of penalizing us for not having them. Those are the types of realities that people are building throughout the city and the world, being led by Black and Indigenous communities. Projects like community gardens that feed the hungry, worker co-ops that promote a more just economy, mutual aid networks, skill shares, occupying and liberating spaces, all of that plays a role in the well-being of our communities. This is not the time to believe what these police agencies are giving us. It is time to believe in the people. Let's continue talking to our community members and hearing their stories, sharing ours. These are the conversations that are already happening across the city, and they will lead to a better future. Yes, we recognize that there is a lot of work to do, but we know and are confident that we are building a Chicago without a police department. We are creating a United States without ICE and Border Patrol. And we are manifesting a world without borders and U.S. military invasions. It is time for the people to decide our own destinies. And we will do it by believing in those, and we will do it not by believing in those in power, but by believing in ourselves. Thank you. And lastly, just stay tuned to look at social media. We will be announcing a series of workshops on ICE's history of terror and ways to plug in into the various organizing efforts happening already.
Thank you so much for that, Miguel. That was Miguel with Organized Communities Against Deportations. Now we'll be hearing from Joaquin Vasquez with the Centro de Trabajadores Unidos. Joaquin will speak to us in Spanish, and I will summarize his comments in English afterwards. Sí, ahora le toca a Joaquín. Gracias.
Hola, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, le escuchamos.
Hola, muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Joaquín Vasquez Amezcua y he sido un líder con el Centro de Trabajadores Unidos como por 5 años. Como parte de CTU, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos, yo he trabajado en campañas para hacer Illinois un estado que es amigable y abierto para todos. Nuestra meta siempre ha sido empujar el gobierno a proteger nuestras comunidades inmigrantes, en vez de empujarlos más a las sombras. Los inmigrantes viven todos los días con miedo de encontrarse con ICE, con el miedo de la deportación, miedo de ser separados de sus familias, miedo de regresar a un país que no es amigable y abierto para ellos. No queremos que también tengan que tener miedo de sus vecinos. La Academia de ICE no es nada más que un esfuerzo más de parte de ellos para atormentar a las familias inmigrantes en Chicago y el resto del Medio Oeste. Esta agencia ha separado a miles de familias en la frontera y ahora quieren entrenar a personas regulares a hacer lo mismo en nuestras comunidades. Esta academia no tomará lugar aquí o en ninguna otra ciudad. Le queremos decir a Robert Guardian y a todos los otros directores de ICE, fuera con su academia, fuera con su mensaje de odio y discordia, fuera con ICE. Eliminemos el departamento del ICE y utilicemos los recursos para otras necesidades que tanto afectan a nuestra comunidad y a todos los demás ciudadanos. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Joaquin, for those remarks. I will briefly summarize Joaquin's points in English. So Joaquin has been a leader with the Chicago Centro de Trabajadores Unidos for over 5 years now. He's worked on campaigns pushing for Illinois to be an open and friendly state. The goal has always been to push the government to protect undocumented and people and immigrant communities, and instead of continue to push them into the shadows. He highlighted the fact that immigrants live in fear of ICE because of detention and deportations, and there should be no fear between neighbors. There should be no hatred between neighbors, which is what ICE is trying to sow with this academy. This academy is trying to torment communities and terrorize them throughout the Midwest, not just in Chicago. Thousands of families have been affected by this dehumanizing system. And now they want to train civilians to do the dirty work for them. And we will not allow it. We won't allow for these academies to happen here or elsewhere. We're here today to tell Robert Guaidian and all other field office directors for ICE to get out of here, that they're not welcome, had enough of the hate, enough of the abuse, and that we're here to abolish ICE, and to say that loudly and clearly, to make a point towards the use of the funds that are used for ICE to be put towards other things that actually support our communities in thriving. So thank you so much, Joaquin, for those very powerful comments. We will now hear from Sarah John with the IFCLA. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, thank you, everyone. My name is Sarah John. I am here speaking on behalf of the St. Louis Interfaith Committee on Latin America. We are here today because we recognize the oneness of our oppressors and the struggle against the racism and hatred fueled by ICE demands our action. As you know, Missouri is within the Chicago field office's jurisdiction. Director Guadian, in fact, oversees ICE ERO operations here in St. Louis and throughout Missouri. So we join our voices today with our partners in Chicago and in Illinois, because while this program is scheduled to take place in Chicago this fall, we know the disease that it spreads will reach our communities as it has in the past. As my colleagues have said, St. Louis knows that this program trains citizens to perpetuate race-based violence and further normalizes hate crimes that already devastate our communities. Our tax dollars should not be spent on this hatred, especially not when a global pandemic continues to devastate our communities. This program is a blatant endorsement of white supremacy that is coded in a false display of patriotism. This program is one more way that ICE seeks to excuse racial profiling and oppression at the hands of agents of the state, and will only lead to increased violence, hatred, and xenophobia in our communities. Our shared values demand our collective action. On behalf of the Missouri congregations, organizations, and individuals we represent, we demand that ICE ERO Citizens Academy be canceled immediately. We demand that Congress take immediate action to withhold funding for this hateful program and defund the hatred of ICE and the militarization spreading throughout police departments and agencies across the government in all future budgets. As we have in the past, in this way and in others, we will continue to work together to abolish ICE and build a community rooted in hospitality, love, and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Sarah John with IFCLA out of St. Louis, Missouri. We will close out our speakers with Sandra Diaz from the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and then we'll be taking questions from reporters and the audience on Facebook Live. So take it over, Sandra.
Thank you. Hello, I am Sandra Diaz, representing the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights on behalf of Mano a Mano Family Resource Center out of Round Lake Park in Lake County, Illinois. As a directly impacted DACA recipient in a directly impacted community, we must end the terror and fear that ICE puts on our families and communities every single day. We do not need another, additional fear of ICE agents or anti-immigrant civilians with weapons training from ICE coming to tear our families apart and put us in cages. That's why we are calling to shut down the ICE Academy and defund ICE. We are taking a multi-pronged approach to this new threat to our families. ICE is overseen by the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and we need to take a step back to see the broader context of what DHS is doing right now to further criminalize and militarize our communities. The ICE Academy is one concern among many. Many of the federal agents that are coming to Chicago are from DHS, specifically from a division under ICE called Homeland Security Investigations. And they are a part of the administration's deportation pipeline. This is a PR stunt to send a message to an anti-immigrant base as we near elections, to support the ineffective policing that our communities of color and brothers and sisters in the Black Lives Matter movement have already loudly demanded alternatives to. DHS is in addition trying to illegally bring a private immigration detention center to Dwight, Illinois, even though we organized and won a state law that bars them from doing so. These actions is what they are so busy with at the moment. What they are not busy with is DACA applications. Even though several courts have already demanded that they accept new DACA applicants, they are avoiding providing a form of deportation relief for at least 300,000 people across the country. And USCIS is also about to run out of money on August 30th, and they are set to furlough 75% of its workforce, essentially shutting down the process for people who are pending citizenship applications. If USCIS does shut down, many people will not become citizens in time to vote in the upcoming election, and we can't allow that to happen. They are investing their time and resources on harmful policies instead of doing their job and helping people by accepting new DACA applicants, renewing green cards and work permits, and approving citizenship applications so that immigrants can vote this fall. We are looking at DHS as a system that is doing all of this in a comprehensive way, to which we need to respond with a comprehensive organizing strategy to fight back against these coordinated attacks. So we demand ICE to shut down this academy now and never open another in the future. We demand USCIS to accept DACA applications and continue to keep operations open for citizenship. And we demand members of Congress to defund ICE, which gets over $8 billion in taxpayer money, and CBP, which gets over $18 billion. These agencies are creating harm and getting billions of tax dollars to do so. We need to divert those funds to community support programs and overhaul our immigration system. We don't want a system centered on death and incarceration. We want one centered on compassion that recognizes the conditions from which and the life or death reasons that people choose to leave their homes in the first place. We have 3 calls to action today. First, our call to action is to take this digital action that I'll be sending in the chat, if you all could share. And this digital action emails ICE and DHS leadership, your member of Congress, and your senator calling on the permanent shutdown of ICE academies, defund ICE and CBP, and fund citizenship and DACA support. Also show up virtually on August 4th with us to pursue, to pressure on USCIS to do the right thing with DACA applicants, and show up in person on September 15 when ICER will hold a People's Academy along with Organized Communities Against Deportations and other partners on the day that the ICE Academy launches. And join us today at 5 p.m. With ICER on Facebook Live for a national push on senators to include all people in the next COVID relief package. So join us and organize to fight back against these coordinated attacks on our communities.
Thank you so much for those very pointed remarks, Sandra, with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. So now we're going to open it up in case any of the reporters who are on this call or any of the folks who are viewing us on Facebook Live, if they have any questions you'd like to ask any of the speakers. For the speakers, if we get a question and you want to answer it, please signal so that I know that you want to be the point person for that. Okay, so we have one question coming in from the Chicago Sun-Times. Do any of the organizations plan to legally challenge what is happening in Dwight, considering that the law that was passed last year regarding private detention centers? Is there anyone on here who, Sandra, you want to take that question? So again, the question is, do any of the organizations here, are they planning on legally challenging what is happening in Dwight, considering the law that was passed last year?
Yes, yes, ICER is planning to challenge it because this is breaking a law that is strictly for Illinois state. You know, we cannot have, we do not allow any more detention centers to open up in Illinois. So we will be challenging that.
And I want to add that, like, this is not rare. ICE loves circumventing state law, loves going against the victories that communities have fought hard for. So this example of Dwight is just an example of like what we saw in California with the Adelanto expansion and in Mesa Verde, where ICE is really trying to go against the wishes of local communities to uproot their immigration detention system. We have a question from the People's Tribune, Bob Lee. Are there any lawsuits that have been filed to stop ICE from doing this? I'm assuming this is the Academy, since we just covered the potential expansion in Dwight. So does anyone have any info on lawsuits that have been filed to stop from having their Citizens Academy? So it seems like no one is currently putting forth any lawsuits, but I do know, and this is something that OCAD mentioned, there's been heightened aggressive force being used by ICE in the past week with an increased number of raids and physical aggression by ICE agents as they're carrying out these raids. And we are looking into action around challenging that level of increased raids in our communities and what it's meant for us. So we have another question with the sometimes. Do you all know how far the ICE Academy has gone so far? For example, are people signing up and are they starting it yet? Does anyone want to take that question from Chicago Sun-Times?
I don't necessarily have an answer for that. Like, we're trying to find out more, and you know, in that spirit of trying to find more and get more information, we also filed a FOIA a couple weeks ago with the Immigration Defense Project and the Center for Constitutional Rights, so trying to get more intel on what's the material that they're sharing and all of that.
But we will name that the Academy is set to start September 15th, which also happens to fall on a very significant date for Latin American folks, which we know is not a coincidence, but just another example of the straight up xenophobia that ICE represents. Any other questions from reporters for our participants? Okay, it looks like Chicago Sun-Times has another question, so we'll wait a little bit while they're typing it. Okay, so lastly, so just to make sure, ICER has not yet filed the lawsuit regarding the potential expansion in Dwight. That question's for you, Sandra. We can't.
So right now, sorry. As of right now, we're still learning more about the proposal, and we'll decide in our next legislative steps once we know exactly what ICE is planning. So as of right now, we haven't filed anything, but we're preparing for that.
Great, thank you. And again, just want to emphasize, like, this isn't rare, this isn't new. ICE loves playing around with contracting structures and changing them around. That we've seen that a lot during the Trump administration, where communities fight to uproot detention and ICE steps in and changes the contract so that they could move forward with detaining our community. And again, the Midwest, particularly Illinois, has been a hotspot for these sort of proposals for the last several years, where we beat them back consistently. And this is the latest iteration of that. We won't allow it, and we'll continue to challenge it because the community is behind us, and none of us want to see detention expansion here. So we have another question from Bob Lee. I had read people in Chicago received letters inviting them to apply. Do you know how they decided who to send letters to, or what sort of people received letters from ICE? I know Sarah John from IFCLA wants to answer this question.
Yeah, just briefly, in our experience, we actually received a letter, this sort of invitation letter that you're referring to, that included a letter from Robert Guardian and then the Word document of the actual application form. That was forwarded to us from a colleague who is on the USCIS sort of community liaison or stakeholder board committee. So at least in St. Louis, we have these, like USCIS does the community stakeholder meetings, like I think quarterly, or they had been. And so there's a listserv that's related to that. So that is how we got it, which is why some of our initial contacts were also including, as my colleagues mentioned, folks at DHS who like to sort of put their hands up and say like, oh, we're just DHS and we're not ICE. And so I think it's really important to recognize that when one agency puts something out, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to the full picture. As far as individuals, I can't really comment to that. I don't know how that worked.
I know Sandra from ICER also wants to touch on this.
Thanks. I just wanted to add, you know, we are looking at what ICE is planning to do, depending on all the details, you know, but we are planning to organize and including, you know, the organizing and legal and legislative response in coordination with our partners. So we ourselves would not file a lawsuit, but we will work to organize.
Thank you for that, Sandra. Any other questions from reporters regarding either the raids that we've been seeing, the ICE Academy that they've announced, which again is set to launch September 15th, or the proposed expansion in Dwight, which would be a 1,000-bed new detention center, a fight that we had won last year by passing state legislation in which they're trying to circumvent. Okay, I'll give it one more minute, but it looks like we're not getting any more answers. I checked our Facebook live feed. It doesn't look like we have other questions there as well. So with that, I think we'll close it out. Thank you again so much to all of our speakers, to our interpreters who are helping out interpreting this call in Spanish, and to everyone watching at home and trying to get involved to uproot ICE and the police from our communities. So we'll follow up with folks. Like, there were plenty of action items that were shared with folks for them to plug in. And as always, you could always reach us through our Facebook pages if you have questions on how to get involved, on how to support and counter ICE's and the police's racist attacks on our communities. So thank you all again and hope you have a great day. Bye.